Thanks for having me. One of the things Alex said is that he wanted this to be a time where you could learn about what teenagers are going through and at the same time interact with questions and discussion possibilities. So feel free, please, right from the beginning, to go ahead and ask a question. If I'm going through something and you're not necessarily understanding what I'm saying, or you think you have an illustration, or anything, any kind of question whatsoever of any kind, please feel free to go ahead and shoot it in there. And then we also would have time at the end for Q&A. I titled this 2020 Perspective because we're on the edge of 2020. And so, and I live in the world of youth culture and understanding youth ministry, so I probably have my thumb on the pulse from more than a couple different angles. I just got done raising my own teenagers, and I've been teaching youth ministry forever, and I've been studying it forever. So, we're going to use Bronfenbrenner's model to look through. Now, that sounds like Bronfenbrenner, just the guy's name is a mouthful, but it's not like it's rocket science. I think you'll see pretty quickly. What I'd like to do is just use it to zoom in on what the teenager is going through and how the teenager of today is being influenced. And then we'll talk at the in the middle to the end about so what kind of effect has that had on the teenager, what are teenagers going through, and what can we as a church, what can we as parents, and what can we as a society do about some of the things that we're facing and talking about. So scripturally first, but realize this, that in the last days difficult times will come. I don't know if we're necessarily in the last days of Revelation, but since God is an eternal God, we might be in those last days, but we still might have a couple thousand years to go. I don't know. So let's pray before I start. And thank you for pausing in your eating. Sorry to interrupt that much. All right, thank you, Lord, for the many blessings of life. Hopefully, Lord, this is a time of encouragement and not a time of discouragement. Lord, there will be moments where we think about how our own children have been impacted by the world around us, what we have done to help and assist, or what we have done and we've made mistakes or missed. So please, Lord, as we go through this seminar, help us to really filter everything everybody is hearing through the Word and the impact that your Word has had on each of us in our lives. And as we filter it there, Lord, may we filter it in such a way that we say, Lord, how can I respond to this? What can I do in response to this? Whether it be with my own children, with the ministry of this church, with my grandchildren, whatever that might be, Lord. And there are some younger people here, Lord, so if they say, what can I do in my school? How can I make a difference in my community as a young person to bring glory to your name, Jesus? May any of that and all of that occur as a result of what we're going through here today, and we ask and trust your blessing on it. In your name, Jesus, amen. All right, yes, please feel free to go ahead and get some desserts or whatever, like Alex said. Bronfenbrenner's model really looks at a human being from the outside all the way in. And so the outside layer in his model is what he identifies. We're going to look at various systems that circle around today's child, today's teenager. All right? And the outside system is the one-layer system that extends for a long period of time called the Chronos system. And he would say, what is the significant era event that might define a 20 to 50-year period of time for what teenagers in this phase of time are going through? And he calls that the Chronos system event. You know, when I was a kid, I remember crawling under drills in elementary school, where they would sound the drill and everybody would get under their desks because a nuclear bomb could be being dropped. Okay, they don't do that anymore today, but the Chronos system event for us, I think, still comes back to 9/11, the idea of terrorism. And I think most of us, while we have adapted to that, our young people have grown up in that culture, because 9/11 really was when a lot of them were being born, and even after at this point in time. But they've grown up with this idea that they might go to school, or they might go to church, or they might go to the movie theater, and someone there might shoot somebody. And so that puts people on edge. Okay, so Then there's the macro system, and everything that goes on in the macro system world also influences people individually. Now here's the thing. In the model, all this continues to influence the teenager, but not just, it has a direct influence, but has an indirect influence as each piece of it works through the pieces that go down more and toward in the center. And so we have the macro system events that have certainly been influenced by the terrorism of our day. Some people might argue that that the chronosystem event would be the drug culture. And so therefore you might say, well, that's why these two have responded in different ways as to how they've responded. He wants to build a wall, etc. Now the terroristic event, government really shows up, large government, not city councils, but our federal governments, the UN, those kind of governments. What's going on in the world around us? We have poverty. Money is the name of the game. It's all about money. Whatever you can do for money, that's what the kids are worried about. YOLO. YOLO is actually probably a little outdated for today's teenager. There was a teenager maybe about 10 years ago. But I didn't want to put up the text abbreviations for what the teenager uses today because it's a lot worse than YOLO. YOLO, you only live once. So why not do whatever you want to do and do it as much as you want to do it until something happens. Like I said, today's texting abbreviations, actually, I have some parents that are looking at me and shaking their heads and saying, yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's a shame. So that's one thing I would actually advocate if you haven't done this as a parent. Just go ahead and Google and say, what are the texting abbreviations that teenagers use? You'll see what I'm talking about. And it might help you if you do have an opportunity to glance your child's phone or your child's friend's phone at any point in time. But all these things interact together, and they have a way of interacting in such a way that it keeps bringing pressure down. Like the NEA, the National Education Association. What's the agenda of the NEA? Well, it's going to bring the pressure down. It has a lot to do, our whole federal education program has a lot to do with who's at the top. One of the things that I would say that has gone on in the macro world today that has contributed to the anxiety of today is that we are seeing major swings. I mean, you couldn't really put a president like Barack Obama out there and then a president like Donald Trump out there and not realize that we have swung the pendulum in the extreme, like off the charts. And I think we're in a place in our world today where we're going to continue to see, instead of the pendulum swinging in the middle, we have such an overreactive culture that it's going to be here one time, and the next time we get the chance to do something about it, the pendulum's going to be over here. So I think that keeps people living in unpredictability. Because everything's one president does, half of what he's doing is trying to undo what the last president did, and vice versa, and it's just going to keep going back and forth. One worldism, globalism, alive today way more than whatever. In fact, one of the most common expressions today is globalism, not globalism. Because half of you shop. If you use eBay, you're sending things to Thailand as frequently as you're sending things to Pennsylvania when you're mailing. So you can text and communicate with people overseas just as easily as you can somebody that lives in the town next over. We have different things going on today that have been turned upside down. It used to be when I used to see the colors of the rainbow, I thought of God and hope in Christ. And now, if you put out a rainbow flag on your building, people think that that represents a cause or support of the idea of homosexuality. And so the world has turned in this macro system of what influences us. I'd like to, is there any way, Alex, is he in here right now?
Yeah.
To zoom in on that clip, or is there not?
Figure it out.
If you can't, you can't. That's all right. I can describe what's going on and you can go look for it on YouTube yourself anyway. There you go. All right. Look it down. This is just I wanted to give you a glimpse of the extreme of the world that our kids are growing up in now. Now that's an advertisement. What else? Oh, Keep coming this way.
Yeah.
Keep coming. Keep coming. Up a little.
Click.
Right there.
Yeah, it's true.
All right, enlarging this and turn up the volume.
I never got fun. Go down.
Oh, yeah, you got it.
Left.
Right there.
There.
Nope,
No,
nope,
over.
nope.
Okay,
did
you got
it.
it. Kind of. Turn it up.
Deep in the woods of North Carolina, an extremist eco group called Earth First bewails the violation of American nature.
I want to mourn the loss of all the old growth trees I've seen, and tell them that we love them and that we don't want them to die, that there are some people here who do care. So I want you to know that, trees, that we care.
I think we are deeply hurting in America. I think we are deeply craving answers. I think that we've lost our identity as we have evolved into technology and into industrialized society. Bring me to this cathedral. Bring me to those guys. Bring me to this rock that has the most incredible life. That makes me feel alive.
I looked at clear cuts and burnt forest, and I felt outraged, but I didn't scream and I didn't cry. And I need to.
All right, go ahead. I hope no one's really insulted by me showing that. I just do think that's a glimpse of the extreme. Now, some of us in here, if you're a little younger than me and maybe older, you're thinking, oh, come on, that's like so far out there. I know for sure that my children in their high school had one teacher who very much embraced that kind of mentality and encouraged that kind of mentality. So they're growing up with this green movement. These are the macro ideology pieces that are pervading as it coexist. It's just a universal, no one religion is right. Every religion is just as right as every other religion. All these philosophies have affected organizations like the NAA, which has a dramatic effect on the microcosm schools, and we'll get to those in a minute. In between the macro system and the microsystems, we have two systems, the exosystem and the mesosystem. Now, the exosystem is the world that you live in that influences the teenager indirectly. What's going on in your job? Do you have your job? Will you have your job? Next year, will you be replaced by a robot or artificial intelligence or whatever? And the stresses and whatever the pressures are of your job. Whenever you come home, you bring that home, and your kids are affected by that. It's the indirect influence of the world around us. So if our bosses are demanding 80-hour weeks, then we're living 80-hour weeks, and our kids see the effect of that. That's exosystem influence. But it's not just the father's workplace. It's the mass media around us. It's the Walmarts around us. And when I say mass media, I've actually taken mass media where some people place it in the exosystem, and I put it into the mesosystem, because the mesosystem is essentially the communicating agent between all the systems. And so whatever the ideology is here comes through the mesosystem down deep. Whatever is thinking going on here ends up coming back out through the mass media. And I thought about just saying social media, but I really do believe it's mass media. Because if you look at some of these organizations, yeah, where we live, if you live next to New York City, it's very different in your world and life if you live where I do, which is in Lancaster. There are different influences that your kids are going to go through that are like mine. Yes, we live in a global world, and there are a lot of similarities between today's city adolescent and today's rural adolescent. They go through a lot of similarities. There are some distinctives. But what breaks these distinctives down are some of these other entities like Nike and McDonald's. There's not a kid in this suburban high school, wealthy suburban high school, who is much different than the kid in the poverty-stricken urban high school. They both want to wear Nike. or Adidas, or upper, or Under Armour, sorry. Maybe I just thought of a whole new entity. But all the social media that we have, it carries it back and forth, and it's all in the same. You can't watch a movie without it being an advertisement for Coca-Cola, without it being an advertisement for Ford. You can't walk into a Ford dealership without a free coupon to the IHOP restaurant. Then you get to the IHOP restaurant, it gives you a movie ticket to the next movie, and it's just, we're inundated. Mass media, when it was first identified, was essentially, the definition of mass media was commercial. Commercial. How you can sell things, how you can advocate and hawk things. Well, if any of you are in any form of social media, and today's research or statistics tell us that adults are, in fact, I'll step out of the flow of the conversation. And do you know what the #1 frustration of the American teenager is today? The #1 frustration of the American teenager today.
No Wi-Fi.
No.
Not enough followers?
No.
Parents?
Low batteries.
Not enough lights from, the comparison between lights and not lights.
No, somebody out here
Low battery.
Not enough followers?
Their parents
Parents.
are always on their
Social media.
phones.
Oh, yeah.
So while you think that's our perspective down, when teenagers have been polled, what's the thing about your parent that bothers you more than anything? It's the amount of time my parent is involved in technology. So, and I would dare say for most of you, that's your main frustration with your kid. Right? So if you really want to have an impact with your kid, look in the mirror and say, how have I been captivated by this? And I have had my own daughter say to me at the dinner table on occasion lately, where we'll be having a conversation, and I say, I don't know. And I'll pull out and I'll say, she's like, no phones at the dinner table. Sorry, that's right. Am I right?
Yes.
She has pulled that out on me. All right, but we have the social media, so in a way, it's good because there can be ground movements where people are Instagramming or tweeting back out what they think. And any of you parents who aren't paying attention to the social media of your children, you should be. Because kids will, exhibitionism is alive and well today. The anxieties and the stresses that they're feeling, it's out there. And they don't seem to hesitate to put it out there. Now some of you are saying, yeah, but I'm blocked, you don't understand. Well, your teenagers are tech savvy, but you can be tech savvy too. There are certainly, if these are your home computer systems, etc., your own home cell phone systems, when I had suspicions about what one of my kids was doing with his cell phone, and I called the cell phone company, I was alerted as to all kind of ways that I could understand what was going on in the world of my kids today by just watching their phone. Now, kids are smart too. You know, they have things like calculator apps where it's a calculator. You pick up their phone, you play around with it, it's nothing but a calculator. They pick it up and they type in a special number-digit code, and all of a sudden it's a whole new world of social media and interaction that you would be shocked to possibly find in terms of communications that are there. But that's a real world. It's affecting the teenager immensely today. Then we have the microsystems, the key influencing, or at least what used to be the key influencing agents in the community of a child. And I think today they still do, but I think they do relative to their intentionality on the impact they want to make and do make, or by their negligent impact and the impact they're not making, because maybe some of these microsystem entities, the school, the family, the church, sitting on the front porch, people have all given up those kinds of things. If you look at, and to some extent we have, if you look at modern developments today, most of us have nice backyard patios and fire pits. And the new houses aren't built with huge front porches. If you want the huge front porch, you got to get the old house that was built in the 1950s. If you're buying a house that's built today, most of them don't have to. Why? Because people aren't sitting on their front porches and interacting socially. They want their privacy And we've cloistered ourselves because of all the anxiety that's going around all out here. And oftentimes our churches reflect all the things that are out here. And while we hope the church has the influence on the teen the way Christ would like the church to have the influence on the teen, sometimes the church has the influence on the teen the way their TV shows have an influence on them, or movies. It becomes something that they look at for entertainment purposes, but not necessarily for deepening a relationship with the Creator and the Maker purposes. But every single thing that I've showed you out here has impacted every single item and entity that goes on in here. And these all impact each other too, to then impact the child. So this is the world that kids are growing up in. Here's our token representative. Oh, I forgot, relative to things like at the school, very much we have things going on that reflects the ideology of the culture. In the local little soccer league program, everybody gets a trophy, and just for participation. Now I teach college, and I teach graduate school, and we're starting to see the millennials in the graduate programs, and we're starting to see Gen Z come up through the schools and starting almost peaking, getting into college now, depending on who you read and what generation, how they define the generations by the years. For the most part, very young millennials are in the undergrad and grad scene now, and I'm dealing with students who've grown up in a culture where a lot of them in their public school systems were told that if they wanted to see that 2 + 2 could equal 5, it does. And that they were being rewarded for creative thinking as opposed to being boxed in by a linear thinking. Now, a lot of us in this room know the reality, and I just recently had an argument with a millennial who was giving me this kind of thinking. There are no rights and there are no wrongs. And no matter how we talk, I said, well, do you want your engineers to believe that? Do you want your medical doctors to believe that? Because I don't want to go over a bridge that was designed by someone who believes 2 + 2 = 5. I don't want my neurosurgeon to believe 2 + 2 = 5. I'd like him to have a more precise attitude than that. However, the philosophy and theology and this kind of thinking has invaded the church. And so while we think the church is the positive influence on the kid, if this has actually influenced the church and the people who have grown up in this current culture thinking this way, and by the way, people my generation, young boomers and maybe old Gen Xers, are frustrated because of the gray that a lot of the younger, and those in the younger culture, and what our teenagers growing up and demanding, a lot of the gray that they're demanding, they're wanting rewards for everything. They're wanting A's just for showing up. We get frustrated by that, but we created it with giving everybody a trophy just for showing up. And unless things start to happen more in the community and the culture, and the church decides that it's going to impact what's going on around it more than being impacted by what's going on around it, we're going to continue to have these problems. Truth takes a back seat to mercy. Now, mercy, to be understood, has to have justice with it. But when we talk about social justice today, we don't talk about God's justice. We don't talk about consequences for actions. We just talk about seeing people who are in need and doing something about it, period. And if you react in anything but, hey, that's great, and let me support you, then you're not necessarily loving, when that is actually the antithesis of loving, by telling someone what they're doing is fine and happy when it's actually going to result in their demise, not just eternally, but presently. So our kids are growing up in this world, and they're demanding, when they don't get what they want, when they want to get it. So we have kids who have grown up in a culture where they get what they want, and it's not just as we provide it in the school system, it's that phone. They want to know, oh wait, I have to write a paper on Abraham Lincoln. Wikipedia. Here's my paper on. I remember going to the libraries and pulling books off of shelves and through card catalogs, and it taking hours to find this stuff. I want it, I got it. Hey, I want to meet my friends Friday night. A lot of parents, and I think kids are growing up in the extremes. I'll make that point at the end. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. This is the culture that the kids have grown up with. The microsystem, things that have influenced out here. So now where does that bring us? It brings us right to what Stanley Nick who is the director of Native American Resource Center, says is a place where there are a lot of kids, like I just showed you that video where they weren't just upset about the trees. If I had muted the volume on that little video clip, it's very possible that you would have thought that they were having a great prayer time. And they were. The only problem is they weren't just praying about the demise of the forest. They were praying to the forest about the demise of the forest. And like this, I had a conversation with a woman who I could not convince that God was not the entity, the essence of a rock. And we just talked in circles. The plane never lands in those kind of 2 + 2 = 5 conversations. You can't get the plane to land. But what I'm trying to highlight is our kids have grown up with this as everywhere they walk. So even if we're not necessarily teaching or showing that in our particular home, we've been influenced by it. And we've brought things into the home that have suggested that. And if you look at some of the programs that they're mostly into on Netflix and stuff like that today, it's all about despair and suicide, 28 days, or, it's all about how miserable my life is. And it's ironic, we'll talk about that in a minute, but what Stanley Nick says, they're craving something that feels like it has reality to it and meaning to it. And while they're pushing against it and fighting against it, they really desperately want it. It's like your teenagers will push and fight and complain when you say, look, you're going to be in by Friday night at 10 o'clock, no argument. Or your grandmother and grandfather are coming into town this weekend. I don't care whose birthday party it is, you're not going. And you will get tantrums and you'll be told you're the worst parent in the world. My one son knew how to push my wife's buttons. All he had to do was say, you're the worst parent in the world. And she'd be like, I mean, I'm overselling, but she didn't like hearing that. He wouldn't say that to me because I'd say, I know I'm not. But they do, they push it, but down deep inside, they're craving the parent who says, discussion's over, you're staying home. Discussion's over, you're not going. In fact, I was just speaking a couple weeks ago, and I had one of my former youth workers, the current youth workers, say to me, just got a call from a parent. 2 nights ago I got a call from the parent, and the parent called me. She had prohibited her daughter from doing something, and the daughter was throwing tantrums all over the house, talking about how it was the end of her social life. She was going down the toilet. She was not going to have any more friends. It was a 2.5-hour battle that night. The parent, in utter cracking angst, called the youth worker and said, am I doing the right thing? And the youth worker said, you're absolutely doing the right thing. Oh, thank you. I needed to hear that. 2 days later, he gets a call, and the mother says, hey, by the way, thank you for that. That was great. When she came home from school yesterday, she said, oh, yeah, no big deal. Well, it's the emotional up and down, in and out, and demanding. They'll fight for what they want, but underneath they really don't want this. They want this. They want the parent who's going to give them boundaries and protection and ideology that's a little different than what the culture's selling them. They don't want the parent to say, you're going to be in by 10, and then when they come in at 12 say, hey, did you have fun? Which a lot of parents today are doing it. But he's saying they're craving the games, and we see, I just read a couple books not too long ago, Generation Hex. They're craving a spiritual engagement that the church needs to be aware of and provide, even though the rest of society is saying to the church, stay back. We need to provide it, and we need to insist on it, because they will find it. We were all designed to crave relationship with the supernatural. We were designed. God designed us that way. And He hardwired our own babies to crave that kind of relationship with us. And we all crave it. So if they're not getting it in the form of truth, they'll look for it in the form of falsity. Which is why we have seen, I don't know, some of you aren't as old as I am, but I remember those first werewolf movies were pretty pathetic. If you were truly afraid by them, then then you were blind, because the movies, it was just like clearly a guy in some mask. Today, this stuff is so real. The zombies, the Walking Dead, the war between the werewolves and the witches, and the kids are fascinated by this kind of programming. It's all over the place. Why? Because they have a spiritual craving. And this rubs up against it with vampires. And where are they? Where have they been? Where are they going? Well, he said, bottom line is they just want to calm their anxious spirits. They just want to calm their anxious spirits. They're looking for a way to calm their anxious spirits. Which, sadly, is one of the reasons why drug use is so high today. And heroin, where the caution, you could get hooked forever, well, that caution sounds pretty good, as opposed to bad. Wait, I could get hooked on this forever and always be high? And you're telling me not to do it? I prefer that to living in the real world that has no boundaries, no definitions, no answers, etc. Kids at risk. 1 in 5 or 15 million American children today and young adults up to the age of 25 struggle with mental illness and learning disorders. And in one of my classes, I decided not to shock you. But in one of my classes with my own students, I don't mind shocking them. And so I put up screen after screen of dismal statistics. It's like after 15 horrible statistics on what's going on with the American teenager today, that I look at them and they're all like, that's us? Oh, great. But ADHD, behavioral and conduct problems, anxiety, depression, suicide. Suicide is spiking. Depression is spiking. Just in the last, between 2014 and 2004, depression among teenage girls has doubled. Institutionalization of kids who are on psychotropic drugs that are prescribed for them is increasing. And it's just off the charts.